Our nation's capital. Decisions are made here that affect all of us.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell. Now from Washington, D.C.
We've got some breaking news right here in Washington, D.C.
Here in Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
D.C. D.C.
D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Do you remember the first time you heard the name of the capital city? Washington. Well, that's easy. But what about D.C.? I remember learning what D.C. stood for and wondering why a foreign country, Colombia, had a district in our country. Well, rest assured, the Columbia, whose district we refer to as the capital of our nation, is not a country at all. That would be way too simple. Colombia. She may easily be the figure that you are most familiar with, but have never heard of. Let's see. She has a motion picture company, a city, a country, a mountain, a university, a broadcasting company, a space shuttle, had a space shuttle. She's the Statue of Liberty, Lady Justice, the Starbucks logo, the Madonna, Isis, Venus, Ishtar, and the list goes on and on. But who is she? Her story begins in the Middle East, in the ancient land of Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago, where, known as Semiramis, she reigned as Queen of Babylon, wife of the historical Nimrod, King of Babylon. And together, they ruled the world's first empire as God, King, and Queen of Babylon. Semiramis was a Renaissance woman. She was a warrior, a mighty warrior. She was a magician, a strong politician, very savvy. So after her husband, Nimrod, was assassinated, she wanted to keep the throne. And how she pulled this off was brilliant. She told the people of Babylon that she was pregnant and that the baby was going to be Nimrod reincarnated. She told them that after her husband's murderers chopped him into 13 pieces, she actually went out and found the 13th piece of Nimrod, which was his dismembered male member. And that's what she used to impregnate herself. And you probably had no idea, but this magic ritual conception is memorialized to this day, most notably with the dome and obelisk complexes that are prominently displayed all around the world. And here's how. The dome represents the womb of Semiramis Columbia, while the obelisk represents, well, it's pretty obvious what the obelisk represents. And the way that this symbolic representation is on display at the Washington, D.C. Capitol is unbelievable. First off, Columbia is perched on top of the Capitol dome, just in case there was any question whose womb it signified. And then the obelisk, which is obviously the Washington Monument, is the only structure in D.C. taller than the Capitol building. It stands at an impressive 555 feet. Or, you guessed it, 6,660 inches. You can't make this shit up. And for good measure, the streets surrounding the federal complex in D.C. are totally laid out in the shape of a pentagram. See, this Columbia thing isn't really just about her. It's actually the Babylonian Egyptian mystery religion being practiced in front of you in clear daylight with you having no idea. Which begs the next question. If America was founded as a Christian nation, and the founding fathers were Christians, then why was all of this pagan and even satanic imagery selected to represent the nation's capital?
But, when somebody says that, the founders wanted America to be a Christian country, I have to challenge that. It's not true.
And he's right. Many of the most influential founding fathers weren't Christians at all. They were atheists and deists. And just like a lot of politicians do today, they only use the facade of Christianity to garner the support of their constituents. Meanwhile, in secret, they were Freemasons and even members of literal underground sex clubs. Some even believe that at least part of the reason they fought so hard for religious freedom here in the U.S. was so they could conduct these religious practices in a more open and public way, without all of the hiding and secrets and persecution. And this is what we're looking at with all of this occult symbology all over the capital city. In fact, the word occult just means hidden, which it is, hidden in plain sight for those who have eyes to see. Keeping with the theme of hidden in plain sight, did you know that one of the days of our week is named after Columbia? Guess which one?
Friday and Venus are linked together as they are the only day and planet that are named after female gods. Friday comes from the Old English Frigdag, which means Frigga's Day, Frigga being the wife of Odin.
But wait, he said Frigga, not Columbia or even Semiramis. How are they the same?
There's this thing in mythology where gods across different mythologies are considered to be one and the same, just with different names and differing stories. This is most well known with the transition between Greek and Roman mythology, where Zeus became Jupiter, Ares became Mars, and so on.
And why is that? Basically, all of the pagan god and goddess traditions have the same root origin. And for us to understand why there are so many different names for what appear to be the same figures, we have to go back to Babylon.
In the Hebrew Bible, it suggests that the builder of the Tower of Babel was the king of Shinar, and his name was Nimrod.
Nimrod, interesting character. He was said to have built the Tower of Babel. He went up against God himself, tried to get closer than anybody else had ever done. As a result, God struck down the Tower of Babel, and as a punishment to humanity for having attempted this act, confused the languages so that everybody couldn't understand everybody else.
So after God confounded the language of the people of Babylon, they dispersed out into the world and continued telling this story. However, because their languages were now different from one another, even though the characters remained the same, their names changed. So getting back to Frigga, or Freya, who is also Venus. Frigga was the goddess of fertility and was married to Odin, god of the dead, which is the exact same story as the Egyptian Isis, goddess of fertility, who was married to Osiris, god of the dead, which is the exact same story as the Sumerian Inanna, who was married to Enki, the Canaanite Asherah, who was married to Baal, the Akkadian Ishtar, who was married to Tammuz, and of course the Babylonian Semiramis, who was married to Nimrod. This goddess, which Friday is named after, was celebrated as the goddess of love, sex, and even witchcraft. So she's basically the goddess of partying. One has to ask, was it that the people liked to party on Friday, so they named it after her? Or was it named for her first, then became synonymous with partying?
Everett McGill, and well, you three ladies are about the prettiest. Me and the devil makes three. Yes. Need no other love, baby.
By now, you can probably guess where this is headed. Yes, the idea of the siren and, surprisingly, the mermaid both originate from this sex and fertility goddess. Named Atargatis, which is just a derivation of the goddess Astarte, she was the ancient Syrian version of this goddess, and by their lore, she was half woman and half fish, which not only gives her the distinction of being the inspiration behind the siren and mermaid mythologies, she's also the muse behind the Starbucks logo. Let's look at it. First off, she is wearing the spiked crown, which is synonymous with Semiramis, the spikes representing rays of light illuminating her way. And on the crown, there's a 5-pointed star, which unsurprisingly represents Venus. And then she's got these winged dingling things on her left and right side. But what do those represent? Ah, okay. They're her merfish legs, spread out and held over her head. But maybe I'm misinterpreting this. Nope. They're her mermaid legs, spread out and held over her head. Classy, Starbucks. You may have noticed that Columbia is often depicted holding a torch. But why? What does the torch represent? You're probably thinking America or freedom, right? Not exactly. The National Park Service says the torch is a symbol of enlightenment, that it lights the way to freedom, showing us the path to liberty. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's start with enlightenment. Defined as the act of enlightening, or the state of being enlightened, it literally means to add light, or illuminate, which of course is where the term Illuminati comes from. If you remember your Sunday school teachings, before Satan was Satan, he was Lucifer, the angel of light. His name literally means the light bringer. So put that in your back pocket for a minute, and let's look at the word liberty. Liberty is defined as the power to act as one pleases, not to be free politically or even from government rule. No, the power to act as one pleases. Which is exactly what Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey, Jay-Z, and other noted Satanists practice with the idea of do what thou wilt. Which makes sense. The story goes that Lucifer was in heaven and was basically over being told what to do by an overbearing God. So he bailed. He came to the earth where he could do what he wanted, his own will, as opposed to God's. That is the crux of the satanic religion that is encrypted in the symbology of the torch that Columbia is holding. It's their core belief that the light of Lucifer illuminates humanity with the power to do whatever they want. So who is Columbia? From Semiramis to Venus, she is the sex goddess and the personification of the concept of freedom from God. She is Lady Liberty, and she is holding the fire that represents the light of Lucifer, which is something that the illuminated ones have known for a long time, since way before they built America. So there you have it. All I can do is offer you the information. The rest is up to you. Thank you for watching.